Rise from your grave. Power up.
All right, let's move on to Anita's next big argument in this video. And again, it's about the nature of games and their interactivity. Okay, so of all the arguments, I find this one to be maybe the most problematic, or at least the most confusing to me. So let's see if we can make sense of this one. Okay, so her second argument is about the unique nature of games and their ability to influence us in a possibly detrimental way. In this video, she states that the interactivity of games is what makes them unique. Previously, I have tried to argue that agency is central to gaming. These two concepts seem to be similar. However, how similar is unknown because she never expands on what she means by interactivity. It would have been nice to have been given some kind of definition here, seeing as how this is one of the main arguments in the video. For example, we can say the TV is interactive because we use a remote control and can change the channels, and sometimes we can even vote with smartphones to change the outcomes of TV shows. However, there is never really a sense of agency in a TV show. What exactly does she mean here? I guess we just don't know. However, I will assume from here on that her idea of interactivity means the ability to make choices. So that's going to be my assumption moving forward. That's my best guess. Her second argument seems to run something like this. Number one, video games are by nature interactive. 2, interactivity means that you make choices to do things in the game. 3, instead of passively watching objectification, like one does with film, you are encouraged to actively objectify women in games. 4, this is an even stronger reinforcement of negative stereotypes. And that seems to be the most of it. That's the argument. To me, this argument is somewhat confused because there seems to be one step missing between 3 and 4, explaining how active objectification makes stereotypes even stronger. I don't care if it's right or wrong, but some argument would have been nice here. We are given none and left to imagine the answer. Also, I know of no evidence we have of this. I don't know of any study that says video games are more dangerous than other forms of media, even studies that claim that video games can have negative influence. I've never heard of a study that says video games are more dangerous. I don't know. If there is one, please let me know. So let's get into the argument itself. I think the biggest problem with this argument is that in a very large sense, all objectification is active. All objectification requires some participation from the viewer of the media to make a judgment about all women. These judgments can't be done totally by the media itself. If objectification were truly passive, then I don't really know how one could actually assign blame for it either. So it's just going to extreme senses. So just that in the background, I think all objectification is active. Maybe we can borrow an argument from Epictetus here and say, well, you're responsible for your judgments. So, okay, so that aside, now, however, this is really not the distinction she is trying to make here. She is going for a much more obvious and surface-level interpretation. She must mean that active objectification is when one makes a choice to control the player character to objectify, and passive objectification is when one simply is shown something on the screen, like a movie, with no input from the player. However, we have to look very carefully at the 2 examples she uses to show active objectification in the video. She uses 2 examples, very specific examples. The first scene is from Darkness 2 at 9 minutes 10 seconds, where she shows the game instructing you on how to control the camera. You must look to the right and see the rack on the brunette. Then you tap to the right only to be told your other right, and then you push to the left to see the brunette with the rack. Now stop for a moment and ask yourself, what was active in this scene? What was actually legitimately chosen by the player? Nothing was. In this scene, you must push to your left to advance the narrative of the story. Where is the active part of this? What choice did the player have here? None. This scene is no different from a cutscene in a game, except that you were required to tap left. The same is true of her second example in the Saboteur. You are required to walk through a dressing room to get to your secret base. The player did not choose this and could not help but go through this area in order to advance the plot. Again, the player is on the passive side here, making no real choice of their own. Now let's get even more confusing. What about the cases where someone chooses of their own accord to kill sexualized women? This is the strangest thing of all, because later Anita herself says at 22 minutes 24 seconds that the player, quote, can't help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon because they were designed for that purpose. Now, I don't buy this, but this undermines her entire argument she's making here by stating that all objectification is passive because the player can't help but do anything else. Now the argument reaches the height of confusion. Everything is as clear as mud. Well, what is the confusion that's going on here? Well, I think that part of the confusion is she's confusing active and passive, as well as confusing permitted with encouraged, thus going back to my previous argument. She wants to link active objectification with encouraged actions in the game. But this is false. Active objectification will always be more linked with permitted actions, quote unquote. In other words, what you're not really pushed to do. Well, more passive objectification will always be linked with encouraged action. So maybe the truth of the actual issue is something like this. When the narrative requires you to do something, the game becomes more and more like a movie or some other kind of less interactive media. It starts to destroy the sense of agency that is at the core of gaming. The game tries to make you the object, well, it becomes the subject. When you have more agency, you try to make the game the object and act on it. Well, you try to regain all of your subjectivity and do whatever you want to do. Most games end up somewhere in between this spectrum. Okay, so I think basically what I'm trying to say is there's a major confusion between what is active and passive objectification, and this is going to link into the toaster argument, but I'm not quite sure how any of this works the way she's describing it. What do you think?
Okay, just can I throw out one thing?
Yes, throw out many things.
Basically, we're at 7 minutes and counting. Do we want to restart the clock and make a second segment, or just keep running with this one?
Do you have that much to say? I don't know if there's anything to say. You want to say?
Well, this is enough of a break that if we need to do, we can just cut this out and make the second video start from then. And okay, so anyways, my first thought is I think you might be confusing her argument about this kind of active objectification. And because if you think back to her second video, when she was talking about these scenes of violence against women, and she talks a lot about the euthanized damsel and some of these games. It's even worse when they make you pull the trigger. Now, what I'm thinking she's going for here is it's not. Perhaps there is some insidiousness in you being given the choice, but what's more insidious about this is when they don't give you the choice, but instead forced you to do something with your own hands.
I know that. I know that, but what is interactive about that?
Yeah, like I said, though you kind of thrust your autonomy, the ability to make choices equals interactive. I don't think she's necessarily using that definition based on that second video. I think she's saying do it with your own hands.
What does interactive mean if it doesn't mean make choices? Because then now please distinguish this form from TV.
I would just have to go as far as the fact that I am given the choice to sit and do nothing. Though I don't necessarily think she's thinking to this level. I
Yeah,
think
that's
she's
the
thinking.
problem.
In a weird way,
Yeah, that's,
you both are and are not given the choice to do nothing because you have to do it to continue the plot. I suppose you could just
Yeah.
turn the game off.
yeah. I really think that the extent of her argument is that making you press the button makes it more damaging because it internalizes if it's video 2, the violent action, or if it's in this most recent video, the one we're discussing now, it internalizes the
Yeah,
checking out the rack.
that's what I'm saying is completely wrong.
Yeah.
That's my argument. Is I'm saying she is not understanding the nature of agency in games, and she's conflating that with active, when that is completely passive. And she's seeing games through the lens of movies and TV.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly say that's true. I just think that she's thinking being forced to do it. Maybe she's even saying being forced to do it is worse than being given the choice to do it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's your typical kind of video game violence advocates speech, where you're like, well, they're training our kids to be killers, right? With these FPS shooters, right? Which, then you have to get into issues like, well, how is pushing a button the same as shooting a gun? We all know it's not. I mean, you get into issues like that. But I just want to keep on the level of when you're forced to do something in a game, that game becomes more like a movie and less like a video game.
Yeah. No,
and
I think
it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. The more you're forced to do things, the more you're just watching a cutscene. And the more you're free to do whatever you want, the more you're actually playing a video game.
Yeah. No, I think your argument is exactly right. I just think it's not her argument.
Yeah.
It's not her argument.
I think she's confused. I think she doesn't understand if we're arguing about because this argument links up to what makes video games specifically destructive form of media. So now we have to get into the essence of what video games are. Now, and every video game isn't going to be this super, you can do whatever you want to. But the essence of video games has got to be interactivity. And the only meaning I can take out of that is agency, which is choice. And if the if the creators are making you do things, what's the difference between that and reading this kind of gory novel where you're basically watching people die in front of you, right? I mean, the difference between the two forms of media is not there anymore.
Okay, then let me throw this at you.
Okay.
Too. Based on her definition of interactivity, is Time Gal interactive?
At a very low level.
Yes. Okay, so you're only given the choice is to when the light flashes right.
It's basically a cutscene.
Yeah. But
seriously, is Time Gal a little more than just a movie? I mean, it's basically just a movie.
Yeah.
You just happen to be pushing buttons at the same time. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I love that game. Granted, I love Time Gal and I love Sewer Shark, but let's not.
Hey, wait a second. There's shooting rats in Sewer Shark.
Okay, yeah, right. There is. Okay, there's a little more going on in Sewer Shark. Granted. Okay, you're right about that. I'm sorry, Sewer Shark fans. I mean, some of these basically start ending up in the level of I'm just watching a movie.
Actually, I downloaded and I watched the Night Trap movie. Actually, I enjoyed it more than playing the game.
There's evidence enough right there because you can actually watch the Night Trap movie. I mean, it's freaking a movie. Okay, anyway, that's what it is. I guess there's going to be a spectrum of games, but what's core about gaming is not going to be sitting back and doing what they want you to do. In fact, if anything, that takes you out of the core gaming experience, I think.
Can I just throw one thing? You feel free to cut this out later. But
we want to start wrapping up, though.
Okay. Then let's not do that.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap up here then and save our discussion for the next video. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Catch you next video. We'll continue this discussion. Bye.